Hey everyone, so today we're going to dive into a religious pamphlet and take a look at what it calls the Law of Chastity. Now, just to be clear, we're not here to argue for or against it. Our whole goal is just to understand what this source material actually says, how it defines the concept, why it says it's important, and so on. Ready? Let's jump right in. So the way we're going to do this is pretty straightforward. We're actually just going to follow the pamphlet's own structure. It breaks things down into four main parts. First up, we'll get into the definition of the law itself. Then we'll look at the reasons why it's considered so important. After that, we'll cover the practical side, how to actually keep it. And finally, we'll wrap up with the blessings it promises to those who do.
All right, so let's get into our first section, defining the law. Before we can talk about anything else, we have to get a handle on the basics. So what is the Law of Chastity, at least according to this pamphlet? Okay, so right off the bat, the pamphlet gives a very, very specific definition. It basically says that sexual relations are only proper between a man and a woman who are legally and lawfully married. That's it. It draws a really clear line in the sand. According to this text, any kind of sexual expression outside of that specific marriage context, well, that's considered breaking the law. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The pamphlet makes it really clear that this isn't just about physical actions. It talks about being morally clean in your thoughts, words, and actions. So what does that mean? It means the law is supposed to reach inside your head. It's about controlling what you think and what you say, not just what you do. The big takeaway here is that chastity in this view is a whole person thing. It's not just about behavior. Okay, so we've got the definition down, but just knowing the rule isn't the whole story. The pamphlet actually spends a lot of time explaining why this law is seen as so crucial. So let's dig into the reasoning behind it. So this naturally leads to the big question, right? Why? Why is keeping this law considered so important? Well, the pamphlet lays out several key arguments to answer that exact question. And here they are. The four main reasons the pamphlet gives. First, it claims that following this law leads to stronger marriages and, more stable families. Second, it's pitched as a kind of shield, something that protects people from spiritual and emotional damage. The third point is all about inner well-being, that it brings more personal peace and confidence. And finally, the text says that living this way actually invites a positive spiritual influence into your life. So it's a mix of social, personal, and spiritual justifications. All right, so we've covered the what and the why. Now the pamphlet switches gears and gets into the how. This part is super practical. It's basically a step-by-step guide for anyone trying to live this law. And here's the 5-step plan it lays out. It all starts with making a conscious decision right now to be chaste. Step 2 brings us back to something we've already heard. You've got to control your thoughts. Then step 3 adds that spiritual layer. Pray for help. Step 4 is all about the real world. Avoid situations that are going to tempt you. And last but not least, step 5 offers a way back if you've messed up. Seek to repent. It's a pretty complete roadmap from mindset to action to recovery. So when you look at all those steps together, what's the big message? It really boils down to this. It's not all on you. The source material emphasizes that keeping this law is a 2-part deal. It takes your own personal commitment and willpower, for sure, but it also requires reaching out for and relying on divine help. It's a partnership, really. All right, and that brings us to the home stretch, our final section. So after explaining the what, the why, and the how, the pamphlet wraps up by spelling out the rewards, the blessings, as it calls them, that are promised to those who follow the law. Now, this is pretty interesting. If you look closely, these promised blessings are almost a mirror image of the reasons for keeping the law that we talked about earlier. The pamphlet connects living this way to things like having greater self-respect and more confidence, building more trust in your relationships, and just having peace of mind without guilt. It also mentions getting more spiritual strength and guidance, and the ultimate payoff, according to the text, a deeper, more unified and loving marriage. So, to pull it all together, what's the big picture here from this pamphlet's point of view? It presents the law of chastity not as just some restrictive, thou shalt not rule. Instead, the whole narrative frames it as a positive principle, something designed for spiritual protection, personal happiness, and building strong family bonds. Everything from the strict definition to the practical steps is really built on that foundation. And that's our walkthrough of this particular pamphlet. It offers one very specific blueprint for morality and relationships. And it kind of leaves us with a bigger question to chew on, doesn't it? How do these kinds of detailed religious laws on morality go on to shape not just a person's identity, but the identity of an entire community? Something to think about.